play twice a year. Me and him go back Tuesday. This is our It's good.
I can't do it. You got that 80, 20, there's nothing to next to they're just
I know, but this is funny. I like the room.
He wants to look distinguished. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much. We're gonna go ahead. We are actually gonna be having a work session, with the planning commission. As you can see, this is not about the council. This is about them down there today. So what we're gonna do first to get us started, we'll have opening prayer by Councilor Brown, pledge by Council President Pro Tem Hardy, and then we will turn this discussion over to Ms. Amanda Thomas.
all right, let's pray.
That's lower faith, right?
There we go. Amen. Now, Father, thank you so much for this wonderful, beautiful weather that you've given us. Thank you for this opportunity we all have sitting here to serve this wonderful community that we are blessed to live in. As we move forward in this meeting, Father, give us all eyes to see and ears to hear and see the vision that you have for this city and for us. Give us the wisdom and the strength to play our part in this role and everyone else in this community to play their part to make this home even better. So thank you for all your love. Thank you for your patience. Amen.
Amen.
Salute, pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
New business discussion, Ms. Amanda Thomas.
I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to turn everything over.
Mike.
Yeah, talking to
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Thank everyone for being here. This has been a long working process. We look forward to having this. Planning Commission as well as steering committee was invited, as well as some city staff and council. And I would like to turn it over to Ben, Matt, and Jim.
Thank you.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Great, how are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. As Amanda was just saying, this tonight's a work session to kind of dive into everyone's first vision and look at the comprehensive plan that we've been pulling together for the last 8-9 months now. Many of you we've talked to before and had you in these conversations, and this is a culmination of all of those conversations and that work. So let me start. My name is Ben Wiesman. I own and manage Blaze Associates. I am a landscape architect and urban planner by profession, and also a real estate development professional. I teach and facilitate at the University of Auburn in addition to my consulting practice. I teach in both the undergraduate architecture program and also in the graduate school for real estate development. I specialize in the planning infrastructure portion of those projects and that load. I'm going to let my team introduce themselves, and then we'll come back to and start the discussion around the plan.
Evening. My name is Matt Lovell. I've been working with Ben and Jim for the past few months in this project, and a variety of others. Architect, urban planner, urban designer by trade, or by training, and a community and economic developer by passion and profession. Work on this, a lot of planning projects and a lot of real estate development and community projects throughout the state of Alabama.
Thanks, Matt. My name's Jim Byard. I have a strategic development firm, Byard Associates. I'm a former city council member, city council president, mayor of Prattville, Alabama, and former ADECA director. And with these two, I like to say that I'm the translator. I translate between the creatives and the government. So I'm the one that Amanda calls most of the time and says, what did they mean when they said this? Or can we add this? And so then I translate back to them. And so that's been my role.
You want to kind of give us a start of tonight?
Sure. This is, first of all, like Matt said, thank you guys for being here. And I know in like 15 minutes, it's going to be 7 p.m. because it'll be dark outside and we're not used to that on a work day. But so I know it's even more important that you're here tonight as it gets dark. But I want to just mention how many of these comprehensive plans I've seen across the state and that I've been involved with, and this one is the idea that jumps out to me is the super user part it's in the back of this plan, and that is the planning commission or the BZA or the city council or the public or someone who wants to develop something in Ellett City can go straight to that super user component and see a high level, a 10,000 foot level of what you're expecting. This is a draft, and I think the idea is that we're going to talk to you guys for a few minutes, a little while, about half an hour, and then you will have this draft, and the idea is that you go through it really meticulously because each of you know Ellett City a lot more frequently than Matt and myself, and then get any changes back to Amanda over the next, week or two, whenever it is. And then at some point, we will come back and we will formally present the final draft to the city council, and the city council will adopt it, or the planning commission, I think, are those who are adopting it. The comprehensive plan, people get hung up a lot because they'll see a project in there and they will, they will either like that project a lot and they want to start building it tomorrow, or they'll see a project and they'll say, I do not like this and I don't want to do this. So I would encourage you not to really get hung up on project-specific ideas, but to think from a high level, because there are some catalyst projects that are in the plan. And so what would happen is, once the plan is adopted, the catalyst project may be, for example, a multi-purpose facility or center in downtown Ellett City. You've got some space downtown, you've got some opportunity downtown. Don't get hung up, I would encourage you, on we don't want to do it this way, or we want this brick color or this type of construction. Figure out, is that a catalyst project that you can wrap your arms around? And then there's an opportunity, because I know Romy's looking over there because she's counting the pennies, and so she's interested in then how do you pay for that catalyst project. So once you decide on that catalyst project, then you figure out strategically and intentionally, how do you go about making that a reality? And that could be any number of, city funding, grant funding, city grant funding, however that goes about, private-public partnership. The other item that I really want to hit is, and that I learned, is that you have certain distinct districts within Ellett City. And you guys know this, and one thing the comprehensive plan does is really bring that to life. I mean, you know that the Avondale Mill Village district is very different than the 280 business corridor, and that the 280 business corridor is slightly different than what I would call the 63 corridor. So from the lake to Publix, now that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? From the lake to Publix, that's a corridor. It is distinct and different from the Avondale Mill Village or the Russell side. And so one thing the comprehensive plan does is identify those districts and then allow you guys as a community to delve in really strategically and really intentionally on redeveloping or maybe an overlay. Maybe you have an overlay, business district in the 63, on the 63 corridor, or maybe on the 280 business corridor. That is going to be very different than Avondale, than the Avondale Mill Village. So I think it's very exciting. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity all over the city of Alexander City. We held meetings with folks, we talked to school children, we talked to business leaders in several different realms, and the opportunity really just abounds. So it will be interesting to see how this flows, how this goes. I hope you're as excited. Like I say, I've seen a lot of these. I've never seen a comprehensive plan that has the super users really located so that you can just flip to that tab and immediately see what needs to be done. Good point to stop.
Oh, that's excellent. So part of what Jim was just saying, the conversation that we've been having, with multiple groups, all of those conversations, it's that community engagement that led us to this document where we're at today. So everything you're seeing in the document is built from those answers we were given by the community, by the steering committee, by the constituents that were brought forward. So that data will be in the appendix of this document in its raw form. And then the document itself that you're looking at shows you those themes that we took from those pieces of information, shows you the projects that came out of that information, and shows you the language that the community was using to define the city. So what we've done as professionals is taken everything the community has said and begin to guide and steer it to projects and implementation. I have personally completed over 40 comprehensive plans across the state in my career to date. Every plan builds upon itself, it gets better and better. So I can confidently say, this is the best plan I've ever put forward together for the city. And what you're gonna find in this plan that's different than other comprehensive plans that you look at, as Jim was saying, is we tried to identify specific projects that jumped out from all these meetings that we heard from the community. We tried to identify specific tools for implementation, and not only how those projects could be done, but also ways to keep the community engaged in the long term. So how does the plan itself get used? And then, as Jim was saying, we'll get to the end when we get to the end, and the comp plan super users, how these different large groups use the plan. How does the developer use the plan? How does the public use the plan? How does the planning commission, the council, the staff, etc., use this plan? So we broke those groups of individuals out and started to give guidelines and best practices and how to engage with the planning process. So the plan itself is going to look at everything, because that's what a comprehensive plan does. We look at the entirety of the city, and we begin to distill that down into actionable items. It sets a framework for growth. It sets a way to be inspired and a way to bring ideas to the table. The comprehensive plan is a living document. It's meant to be changed and it's meant to be updated. So it is not a standalone document that forever is stamped and must be followed exactly as written. It is meant to inspire and bring those ideas in and give us all the same platform to build from. So as you go through the document, as we go through it, pay attention to the goals, the vision statements, the feedback that was given, because those become the underlying pieces that set up the whys. And why we did this, why this was done, why these projects were brought forward. Because it, once again, it all comes from the community. So we're going to start, I want to make sure this is a conversation, this is a work session. So if you have a question, just let's have that conversation as we go through the document. As we were saying, our goal is to kind of go through the document holistically for about the next 20, 25 minutes or so, and then have just some general back and forth Q&A. And then you'll have time to just review the document, send your updates, take pictures of the pages you want changed, the things that you need updated, and we will start pulling all that together to bring it back for the Planning Commission and the Council for adoption in December, the public hearing. That makes sense on our timeline and where we're kind of going? Any questions, comments right now before we dive right into the document itself? Okay. So we want to make sure we acknowledge everyone we've been talking with, and just start at the very top. And please forgive us for misspellings, especially when it comes to individuals' names. We get those wrong a lot. Please feel free to correct us. We will find mistakes throughout this, and that is okay. We wanted to give that side there for the public right up front, how to read the document, how it comes together. And then just that overall table of contents of what we're going to go through. I'm going to start and spend a little more time up front on the executive summary of the document, because that can really lead us to a lot of the points that we were all just talking about. Starting with just vision and goals. And we kind of highlighted those top 5 goals that came out from the community. And the vision statement that was developed from all these different community sessions. Now, we use this as a guiding statement because one of the issues that we have, and we'll talk more about, is helping you define your vision for what you and where you want Alexander City to grow, how you want it to grow. So we put this as a guiding statement right up front. Alexander City is a community that supports its working class, connects with the environment, and celebrates its unique character. And immediately, the executive summary turns to the first map, and we're going to kind of spend some time on each of the 3 main maps in the section. We start with the future land use. And the future land use is just that. It's a guiding map that just shows large bubbles of use. This doesn't affect zoning. This does not affect subdivision regulations. This just states, per the comprehensive plan, this is the concentrations of uses that we've said and where we want them. And what we're finding is there are clear commercial nodes throughout the city in the red dots. They need to be distinct and different from what's happening along 280 and that commercial corridor. We need to make sure we continue to build on the industrial needs of the employment centers. And we need to make sure we have housing. Housing became one of those real issues that we're going to come up again and again throughout the document. And we concentrate those uses. We concentrate new housing and mixed use of housing around those commercial nodes that we're supporting restaurants and businesses that go into those nodes that we want to see. And then we also transition that housing into single-family detached housing that we see everywhere right now that fills our eyesight. And we keep that housing. And we support that housing. And we create conservation zones around those green fields and wetlands and those tributaries that feed into that water quality. Where we want housing and development near those places, but we want it done in a way that also respects that natural environment. So it's just a way of saying, yes, we want growth and development there, but we need it done in a way that protects that natural resource. Because that resource is an economic driver for our city. And we need to make sure we know that. The land use and zoning, we're going to go through those issues, and then we get to those 5 major focus areas: housing, legibility and image, the downtown development, economic development overall, and infrastructure. And so each of those will be handled in their own section. The next map we come to takes all of that information from land use, development zones, and all the projects we're potentially talking about, and puts them together in one map called the strategic development concept. And that's what this map represents. It's everything. Every graphic decision we've made, everything we heard about is turned on and shown in this map, and it gets a little busy. But we want to show everything at once because that's important to see. And as we go through the document, we're going to break this map apart and break it down into its component pieces. But this kind of leads you through where we see new infrastructure that's needed to help backfill the housing needs. We see the new commercial areas. We see the new gateways and image corridors, overlay zones. We're looking at new ways to grow the industrial areas. Looking at the northwest quadrant there. We're looking at an overall trail and park system and new parks dotted into existing neighborhoods so that everyone is connected by sidewalks or trails to green space and open spaces. So we're starting to take all those projects at once and show them in one map. And yeah, it gets really busy, but the whole book will be about building up and showing the different pieces and parts of that strategic development concept. We also start talking about those key projects that are identified on that map and through these discussions. And as we said, we're going to go into those key projects later in more detail, but looking at the Russellville redevelopment area, commercial corridor overlay districts, infill housing opportunities, the Avondale Historic neighborhood revitalization, green infrastructure, gray infrastructure, town square and multi-use facility, mixed-use developments overall, and affordable housing. So we've got a lot of projects and a lot of focus areas to kind of look at in the document. The last map we get to are some of those proposed projects that we just talked through, those 9 or 10 proposed projects. And so this just starts to highlight those projects in one map. So once again, we peeled back a lot of those layers of strategic development concept, and we're just starting to talk about those 9, 10 projects and laying them out together and mapping those together. And then finally, we'll have an implementation strategy. How do we begin to do all this work? How does it all come together? And that kind of gives you a holistic look at the entirety of the plan itself in that executive summary. Any comments, questions so far, just on where we're starting with the big picture? Ideas, thoughts? The next couple of chapters, I'm going to move a little quickly through because it's really good information. It builds and is the foundation for everything that you're seeing in the executive summary and the SDC. So we want to start with just that introduction to a comprehensive plan, because a lot of people, especially in the public realm, don't do this. And just to know what a comprehensive plan is, the overview of it, how it's organized, and some of the terms that we're using in the plan. As Jim was saying a few minutes ago, one of his jobs is translation. And a lot of times, designers, planners, we use one set of vocabulary, developers use another set of vocabulary, city officials use a different set of vocabulary. We're generally all talking about the same thing, but we use 3 different words to describe it. And sometimes that gets very confusing. So we want to provide a moment in the plan just to define some of those big terms that we're using. So we go through what a comprehensive plan is, how it's implemented, and who uses it. We're talking about that overall structure and organization. Keep walking over there. We're talking about those best practices from this process, analysis, input, documentation, and then you're going to see some of those common planning terms that we're using throughout the document. So we're kind of defining those on the next couple of pages. And that brings us to the vision of the conference. Starting with that conference plan, who we are today and where we're at. And I'm going to let Matt share a thought here too on capturing this moment in time, because that's one thing conference plans are meant to do.
So these are, when we're talking about the difference between comp plans and strategic plans, really what a comp plan is doing is marking a milestone or a moment in time. It's kind of like I always struggle when I was doing math. Math is not my strong suit. I think any accountant could talk about this. A spreadsheet is a snapshot of a moment in time, but the impression is that it's 100% accurate and everything about it is correct. The moment it was done, everything started changing, right? Comp plans do the same thing, but it is important to do that, to recognize where this city is in its moment and where you are in your growth. And so we try to capture that in the current conditions. And there's really basic information in here, right? The city boundary might seem like that is a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people don't understand where your city boundary is. It's not necessarily right. So there's a lot of basic information in here. Asset mapping is what we like to build a lot of planning efforts on, looking at what are the things that are already in place, what are the positive things that are happening in your community that you can grow around. So in here, it's really around your employment, industrial centers, your downtown being the core of the community, the recreation centers that are a significant portion of what happens within your community, along with some of those significant places where things happen. Because we'll end up taking these and converting those into destinations for some of the projects or some of these activities that show up in other projects. And then the existing land use and activity center, where if the map that Ben showed was about where we want to be or where the community wants to be in 10 years, this one is representing where you are now. So if you were doing some cool graphic, it would morph from this into that, and then be blobs that would happen. Just a little visual key for you guys as you're going through the document. If the background is the map, that's an existing condition or something that's happening right now. If the background of the map is that sort of white and blue, sort of Google-esque thing, those are proposed. So that's just a little visual view for you as you're reading. Many of you, I think everybody in here came to at least one of the public meetings. Any good comp plan foundation is public meetings or public input. Our job is to distill that information, reconcile it with the goals of the representatives and some of the best practices, but you have to go out and learn what the community wants. So that's how we begin our process. The raw data will be in the final version as an appendices. Right now, what you're looking at are summaries of some of those meetings and the key things that left out to us is important for what the community wanted. And then we talked about tools, communication tools, right? And so this is where we begin to talk about the kinds of things that could happen and the way that as you use this plan, you continue that conversation with your community. So that we had this one version in the beginning, but then underneath community tools are all the different ways that you can use this plan to improve communication. And so that is a theme that's coming up throughout this entire document, is making sure that we don't fall into bad habits, or you don't fall into bad habits of sitting within your bubble of government and not reaching back out to them. And those are very specific ways that you can begin to do that. All right, so that's to say then, when you're going through this, you do need to have sort of a singular statement. There's a benefit to having all of this pulled into one line that you use as a reference point for everything that you're doing. From a vision standpoint, for us, this became really an interesting challenge that we don't run into often, where one of the issues that this community has is that you are still trying to coalesce around a clear identity following the changes that have happened after the departure of some of your industry, right? It still very much feels like you're in that moment and y'all are working together to try and sort it out. So instead of saying, we have a clear vision, or you have a clear vision, we use this statement as an organizing, something to organize the entire plan, right? Ben read it earlier, but it's a community that supports its working class, connects with this environment, and celebrates its unique character. Those four elements, community, support for working class, environment, and unique character, become things that will show up in every single project and sort of point that you'll see throughout the rest of the document. We advise, well, I'll let Ben get to that. The other sort of organizing factor for the whole thing are these three, what we call plan values of coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. It's very easy to blend those three things together or use them as the same, thinking they have the same definition. They're very different terms. So we felt like it was useful to define them here and then point it out so that you guys can consider them as you go through the rest of it, but also understand those were the approaches that we took throughout this whole thing. So that's the introduction to the document, and I'm going to let Ben talk to you a little bit more about the actual plan.
So once we've captured all that community input, all the stakeholder input, we've dived into how does the existing physical conditions start to align and emerge. And so we're looking at the existing zoning districts, existing land use that's happening throughout the city, so we're not ignoring anything that's on the ground right now, but we start with all those assets we talked about. We start with what we do have. And then once again, we talk about and we start to introduce that overall strategic development concept. So as we mentioned earlier, we spend a little more time on the SDC, and we look at a lot of those pieces and parts, and those are going to be pulled apart again later in the document. We also look at that future land use, and we talk about how we got there. What were the guiding principles that came from the community that told us that's what we needed to see? Number one, protect the green infrastructure. Two, build a city of neighborhoods supported by activity centers. Maintain and enhance the existing community character. Expand transportation accessibility. Protect and reinvest in the community. And so using those 5 guiding principles, that's where that future land use plan comes from. Once again, that's all from what we were told in all those community meetings and what we distilled out of those. We then describe those land use categories just so we can put an image and some text to those. So as we're talking about, what do we mean by medium density residential? What do we mean by mixed use? What do we mean by that natural conservation area? So we wanted to give a visual and also a brief description of what we meant in each of those categories. Once again, a comprehensive plan is that guiding element. It allows the Planning and Zoning Commission, when a developer steps into the room and says, this is what I want to do, it allows the P&Z to say, are you following our comp plan? This comp plan is what the community said they wanted. So you, Mr. Developer, you, Mr. Developer, following along with those goals and principles. It allows the P&Z to make those decisions. I can speak to that. I sit on the Hoover's Planning and Zoning Board right now. And we have in front of us, we just adopted our newest comp plan about a year ago. And so we're going through learning how to use it. And we've got a few cases in front of us these last few months where we have a large developer wanting to take an existingly zoned commercial district and add residential uses. Now, our comprehensive plan speaks to this issue and says, if you've got existing zoning, we know we need more houses and rooftops to support those future businesses, to support those future restaurants and small business needs. So including residential in that development is a good idea. At the same time, we've got a group of neighbors who live around there who have started a petition for us to say no to that work. Now, that puts me in a position as a P&Z member. Do I live by what the individual is saying in the meeting to me, the no, or do I live by the document that was crafted by the community that says, these are our values and this is where we want to go? As the P&Z member, I'm more likely to vote with my document, and then I will let the city council member and the constituents take that up in the next discussion period. That's the process of that government. So that zoning change requires a developer to first come in front of P&Z, and he can be either voted yes or no, but then they move to council for their final vote. And council is that final recommendation. But this document begins to set that framework. So as we get to the back end of it, we'll see the nice thing about having a comprehensive plan that not only you believe in, but you're using, is it gets the developer from day one to understand your values and what to bring or not to bring forward. It starts setting an even playing field for us all, both the public, our elected officials, and our development community, so that we're all working together to get these projects out of the ground. All of that is to be said, we moved into these focus areas that we talked about. These became the big topic and themes through all the big meetings, all the conversations we had. So we talked through housing, legibility and image, downtown, economic development, and green and gray infrastructure. And we go through each of those topic points, not only mapping out exactly what we're talking about, but providing goals, some key findings, and then opportunities for development in each of those focus areas. These aren't to say that these are projects, but I think this is where we can start to help people start to create projects as developers come forward. We can start to open the imagination to what could be. The nice thing about a comprehensive plan is it's not saying yes and no, it's saying here are our guidelines. And we want you to come with ideas that we can then find the right solution to move forward. This is not saying this is the only way to do it. This is the right solution. But it's giving us that framework to find that solution. So in each of those focus areas, as we go through this chapter, you will see that we'll always have goals, we'll always have key findings, and then we'll always have opportunities mentioned in each of those areas. Under economic development, one of those opportunities, incentives for entrepreneurs and small businesses. So just that idea of something that can be done internally, but becomes a very strong, powerful, externally facing tool is having a system of incentives that are documented that let owners know, yeah, if you're going to bring a new business and you can do X, Y, and Z, then we're here to help you. We may be giving you a sales tax reduction. We may be giving you a property tax reduction. There are lots of tools that we can do that are not about a dollar, but are about time and allow business to thrive and succeed. So finding those opportunities and starting to work on those. And those may be projects that we want to engage in. after the comprehensive plan is adopted. And then finally, green and gray infrastructure. Once again, understanding those, talking to those key findings, and then those opportunities that immediately jump out from there. One opportunity, the citywide pedestrian network, in the green and gray on page 71. Just this week or last week, the federal government just put out guidelines for next year's RAISE grants. So those are federally funded infrastructure projects that engage with pedestrians and vehicles as you move around the city. How do you do that? And projects can ask for up to $25 million. I think this city could easily use $25 million to build a sidewalk network. And all of a sudden, this plan says, yes, that's a project we want to go after. How do we do that? We start identifying those funding sources that begin to help us do those things. And or we start chipping at it in pieces at a time with developers and with our own dollars. And so this allows us to start doing that, but we're starting just to identify the goals here in this document. And then finally, I'm going to let Matt talk a little bit about implementation and how we've kind of structured this. Oh, the city government part of implementation. All right. So jumping right into that, well, actually, I'm going to let Jim talk about city government part of implementation. That'll go better.
Well,
My expert is
y'all know about that. The planning commission will approve this and then go to the city council. And as Ben said, the planning commission, you get to hear the folks, you get the first bite at the apple, and then they go to the council. But again, this super user group in my section, I'm going to call it the brown tab section, it's just, I think it's very user friendly because it allows you as the planning commission and the city staff, Drew, to be, and Amanda, whoever from the city staff, to point them in that direction. And then the other thing that I think is glaring is, and this is there's no negative reflection, it's just a fact of a growing community, is that your zoning needs to be looked at. It needs to be updated. I don't think that's a shock to anybody on that dais and anybody here, because that's just a fact of a growing community. But
to your point, knowing what kind of changes to make in that document,
absolutely.
the comp plan leads you into, these are the kind of changes we need the zoning to make.
Well,
This is where we want to go.
right, and as Ben mentioned, when this is adopted, then if a developer comes in and has a housing development, you can point them in this, just show where you are needing housing. And for example, workforce housing, maybe redevelopment of the Avondale Mill Village. And you can, not that you're pushing them there, but you can gently nudge them there. There are different housing types and different folks looking for different housing types that will live in different areas. So I think and the other thing that Alexander City is unique in that you have is, you do have from A to Z of housing stock, price-wise. And oftentimes people who are not from Alexander City think that you cannot afford a house here because all they see is lake housing. And some people cannot afford lake housing. There are an awful lot of people that can. But there are other housing opportunities in Alexander City that allow that person who may not can afford a lake home the opportunity to enjoy the lake and to enjoy the advantage of living in Alexander City without paying that price. I don't want to get too far into housing, but that is exactly what this document does. And when it's adopted, that gives you the authority to say to that developer. And as Ben and Matt and you guys know, it's not set in stone. It is a living document because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what the future's going to bring.
So at this point, what you're doing is you're transitioning the document from big ideas, sort of concepts, things that might happen, into trying to translate those into tangible actions. Instead of getting down into the strategy zone, we're trying to translate those into projects. And there's sort of two big groups of projects here, right? There's the ones within the city government that we're talking about, the three that are listed on page 70E5. Aligning your zoning with what's in this plan, making sure that development ordinances align with that zoning and the needs that are in here. And then making sure that development services or government itself has the resources necessary to implement that, whether it's financial, staffing, or something else in writing. That's just as important as the other part, which is what a lot of people get excited about, the physical projects, things that you begin to actually build, or the things that translate themselves into something you can tangibly touch, right? And so that in here, those are what we call projects, simply enough. We listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which then went through 4. But also, as we talk about the projects, we recognize that there are people and groups and organizations that are actually going to be doing this, right? So we're not saying that government has to do these projects. We're saying these projects are necessary to begin realizing what we talk about in the plan, and that there's lots of different groups that can make them happen. So the super users that Jim referenced that are found on the brown pages, those are the groups. And so what we're trying to do is talk about the physical things that can happen, what's necessary from an idea standpoint, or a little bit of background around them. So if you look at Russell Mill, that's something that's significant to this community, right? Page 8, sorry, page 8. So all this is, instead of saying this is exactly what should happen within that redevelopment, it instead tries to set up a set of principles within those boundaries that reflect the bigger ideas that sit within the documents. The idea of a mixed-use development is something that would align with that. Not just industry, not just housing, not just commercial, but something that supports sort of like a walkable community and creates more of a neighborhood feel. We lay out a little bit of history of the site, because that was necessary for us to wrap our heads around it, what the development might look like, and then lay out what we call design principles. We use design principles and development principles throughout this document. Those are the kinds of things that, as you're trying to build the team that begins to help you think through the individual projects, these couple of pages give you the foundation for that conversation, to make sure that you're talking to the right kind of groups and that y'all are starting from the same baseline.
I might add, Matt, I might also add that somebody that is a real user for this document would be general citizen. Because oftentimes citizens, they're right now trying to get their children fed and whatever they're trying to do to get ready for tomorrow. They don't understand why the mayor or the city council doesn't just snap their fingers and X happens. And so you can point that citizen to these super users, and they can then get an understanding of why you have a planning commission, why you have a BCA, why you don't just snap your fingers and things happen. And I think sometimes we forget about the citizens because they're not always here at City Hall. And sometimes when they're here at City Hall, they come when their ox have been gored, so to speak. They don't just come on a good day to say, hey, I just want to come by City Hall and say, hey, I'm glad y'all are all here. They're here because they're frustrated about something. And so this document, you can point them to that, whether online or in a handheld document.
So that's, the public is conveniently found on page 103. They're one of those super users. And those pages all look the same. In the spirit of making sure that we're all talking the same thing, there's a little bit about who are they. And it's a little bit more relevant when we're talking about city government, in that your average citizen may not understand all your individual roles and responsibilities. So we take the time to talk about who falls underneath each of these user categories. Best practices, right? What are the ways that this group can use this document? Tools are the kinds of activities, the things that you can use. And then tactics are the implementation. So these are all structured the same way, so that as you're reading through it, making sure that we have the right user groups, making sure that we're thinking about them the right way, thinking about that. And then the projects themselves, they respond more to the character of each individual project. So the structure from a document standpoint will change for each one. In the spirit of time, so that we can hear from y'all in reaction to all this, we'll wrap up by saying What's not in here right now are these appendices, and this is just that raw data, raw information, things that we've collected. So we looked at the comp plan from 10 years ago, updated the data, the demographic information, things like that, into here. And then the public, which actually did make it into this one. And then the public input and stakeholder input are transcript of those conversations, and they'll show up in here as well. So, you got any closing thoughts before we let them tell us what they think?
So as you are going through this document, it is, over 100 pages long. It's a good sized document, but it needs to be that big because we have a lot to talk about. You have a great city with a lot of wonderful assets. We had a lot of great conversations, and all that needs to be documented. So I know that this is everyone in the room's first time pretty much seeing this document, but we wanted to take tonight into this working session just to walk you through the document as a whole. So you can start to understand how we built the document, what informed this process, and then as you get into it and reading it more over the next week or so, and you start asking questions and finding changes that need to be made, we can get all those sent back to Amanda and back to us, and we can make all those changes before a public hearing in December with the Planning and Zoning Commission first, and then the council.
And that public meeting will not follow this format. We are not going to walk them through the document page by page. Don't worry, you're not gonna have to do this again.
Can I ask a quick question? So, y'all mentioned that the three of y'all are working together, but you've done over 40 of these from the state. I'd just like to have a quick opinion of what you've seen as the best practices for adopting it and it being successful, and worst practices as far as what kills the plan. It's guaranteed to kill the plan. And I know there's one glaring thing, it's the financials, obviously. You gotta have money. But, I'd just like to have your feedback around that and governance around that.
Yeah, I think over my career and putting together lots of comprehensive plans together, and one thing I've learned, and what you're not, why I will say about my statement, this is the best plan I've ever put forward, is that in plans in the past, a lot of times the planner doesn't do a good job of finding key projects or ideas to create inspiration to move the plan forward. And they don't document that. Planners have a lot of stuff up in their heads, and sometimes they forget when the community's talking to them to translate that all on the page. So one of the goals of this plan was to provide you not only projects, but also tools for implementation all throughout the document, of ways to continue to talk, the ways to continue to do business, internal changes you can make, external changes, the way to share the document. And so we've developed a suite of tools throughout here that touch on all of those things, and a lot of those have nothing to do with a dollar. It's just engaging that communication in that collaboration with one another. And we found in your community, one of the assets is all these great organizations you have, and a lot of times it's just getting everyone on the same page to take that next step forward together. And that's just that collaboration piece. And just knowing that the document exists that you can all reference in the conversations starts building a vocabulary and a way to talk to move into that project and to move through that and see it done. So that was one of those tools. I think, and a lot of times in the past, and I know I was guilty of it in a lot of projects, we never spent the time on the project itself. And I'll give you a prime example, Trustful. I did the comprehensive plan for the city of Trustful back in 06, 07, somewhere around there. At that time, that mayor, we talked about doing something in the downtown with a big dot, a big asterisk in the plan, said downtown, right there, you need to go do a bunch of cool stuff right there. Well, we never defined what that was, and so it sat there, and that plan sat on a shelf until the developer showed up 15 years later, Kobe Lake, and stepped in there and said, I want to put a brewery in the downtown, I want to do this, I want to create a public space. All the things that were defined in the comprehensive plan, but never talked about to a level of detail. And so now, it took 15 years, but Trustful's got this great downtown. And it was a place that at the time, 15 years before, you told the citizens, we're going to put a brewery, it's going to be a walkable district, people are going to live downtown above the shops, and there's gonna be an amphitheater, a green space with a TV screen, and things are gonna happen, everyone would laugh. But today, there are hundreds of people moving to Trustville every month to be around that kind of downtown activity. And so, yeah, that's one of those. Yes,
Based on your knowledge of what you've seen and the information you gathered, what kind of formula, what would you use to determine basically how many homes are needed in this area with public spheres and other things going on coming?
So I would recommend doing a detailed housing survey as a step out of this comprehensive plan, that you can work with the local MLS, work with the local employment agencies, and there are firms and individuals who will pull that together to get you to a more concrete number of, we need X homes. But we know right now that just from talking with your housing authority, they're in need of, was it 50 homes immediately? Affordable homes where they've got families, mom, dad, and 2 kids that need to transition into a home ownership program. And so we know we've got a user group there. We know we've got new industrial sites, new employees coming, are looking for homes. We know we're building.
Joe Planet Cat.
Yeah.
The community college, is very interested in, I don't want to say, but there was a
You're
good
right.
number that he was, well, yeah, that's up there. He can, excuse me, Councilman Hardy's up there. But, yeah, when we had a discussion with President Lynn at Central Alabama Community College, he discussed opportunities around housing and an immediate need. That
School system, medical, all of them have needs. So sometimes that housing authority, beyond just those conversations we have, where we've documented those in the notes, but that goes that next step to say, okay, we've heard, from the conversations, we need about 200 plus homes now. But what does that really mean? How many is it? If we just did 10% of that and put 20 new homes down, would they all go tomorrow? Yeah.
According to this data, if I'm reading this correctly, maybe I'm not, but yours says vacant houses, 1,151 homes, do we assume those are not livable?
That's part of that housing structure would be. That was from that 2014 plan that we just updated through the census data. But that's what the census data is currently counting, is how many vacant homes are currently in the city.
I think part of a lot of that is your
It's-
lake stuff that are not.
I mean,
Right.
when you say vacant, to me, it's available for somebody to purchase and move into.
I think he's.
We're not looking, that doesn't include, like Brett just said, part-time, someone that has a home on the lake that doesn't live there full-time. Is that number in this 1,151?
Yes, I would assume so.
That's a huge number.
Yeah. And the problem too, when we get back to housing specifically, and not to spend a lot of time, but to that, those two questions go hand in hand, is a family coming to Alexander City to start, because you have such a great school system. So I want to move my family here and get my kids into your school system. I may not be able to afford remodeling an older home. So even though it's an older home that's vacant, that's actually unaffordable to me, because I've got a mom and dad that both have to work, gotta get the kids in the school system. I can't remodel, I gotta go buy a house that's affordable, so I can get my starter home for my family going.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
And so there's all those nuances of housing come into play. And that's where a detailed housing survey begins to help answer that question. Not only what's our need, what's our existing assets, our laws of what we've got, but then what kind of housing, the typologies do we need? Do we need single family startup housing? Do we need duplex? Do we need something for young professionals to rent, or for people to rent for 6 months or a year until they find that permanent house? Do we need cottage homes or ADUs for elderly individuals to move down and step into, so that they don't have to move to a different community, but they get to retire here in Alexander City and keep going to the same churches and keep going to the same grocery store and stay in our community? But they don't need the quarter-acre yard to mow. They don't need the 3 bedrooms. They just now need the 1. So we've got all these stages of our own life too. Yeah, housing becomes a very nuanced
I'm sure these big developers, they do all the research probably before they decide to move into an area, I would think, before they're going to invest that kind
You
of
would
money.
think. Not all we're in housing. And so if you have areas, and I'm asking, would the comprehensive plan cover it to help guide the planning commission to do the overlays? We mentioned Avondale a lot, and so will there be a need for an overlay there? So we don't want just affordable housing, we don't want just houses thrown up, me personally. There's really cool style older houses in that area. Would the comprehensive plan be able to choose a few styles to kind of help point the developer in the right direction of the style home, and instead of somebody goes in and just builds a bunch of little, like the Jim Walter kind of homes in there that's cookie cutter stuff without, then so you lose, because there are a lot of neat houses in that area, they're just old and run down.
Yeah.
As far as architectural, so would we be able to cover that in here to help them, or does that fall on?
I would suggest.
Because you hate to lose the character. of
Right,
that area.
Exactly, yeah.
A community that has done a really swell, good job of an overlay district in the Mill Village is Opelika. And in their Mill Village, of course, the mill is not there anymore, but they provided an overlay district for businesses because, and it's very similar. I mean, a lot of mill villages are similar, but they provided an overlay district for businesses, so you could have, maybe you have an accounting office, but you don't have a McDonald's. Nobody wants to live next door to McDonald's, but you know, if you're an accountant, you work running your business there, you're okay to live next to that. And then they did, I'm almost positive they provided certain style types. So you did you had new housing, new infill housing, you have new infill housing. And it's also close to their downtown now, which Avondale could be close to your downtown. I think that would be a good, I think that's a good community to look to not reinvent the wheel. But they have a great mill overlay district now.
A lot of that does, to go back to the historical commission,
Right.
you know, because you don't have to get permission from them, a lot of those areas, and I think Avondale is part of the historical district now.
I will tell you that I was doing a little project for a family history project about Comer Methodist, where my grandparents were members. And I reviewed just recently, because of that, the Avondale Historic. It is a historic district, and it has a lot of structures in the historic district. You can Google it and find it online, but it's definitely, so that's going to add a little wrinkle of what you can and cannot do, but you could do an overlay district. And you have, y'all know, there are a lot of areas in the Avondale Mill Village where you have dilapidated housing and you have houses that are down, so you can have infill. But there really are some unique styles of homes, and that historic document, and I don't know who has that, I'm sure it's here somewhere at City Hall, but you can find it online. It's pretty interesting.
It's on the application.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's online, and if you look in the section, pages 91 through 92, 93, or 92, that's where a lot of that came from, was from the application for the historic district, which includes the mill and the neighboring district.
Oaklawn and the two churches.
But what the principles and opportunities on page 92 do is they start to capture some of the questions that you're talking about. What's the framework that you're setting up? What are the conditions you need to look at? Things like, certified local government is in here as a way of gaining access to funding opportunities. Because of its condition, there's access to sort of tax credits, but the infill housing, it's going to be about the developers that you recruit to come in and do this kind of work as much as anything else. And you'll find that by having a comp plan that begins to lay out these values, you're beginning to attract a higher quality developer or home builder that's interested in it. That's how, to your question of good implementation practices, use this document to demonstrate the community's interest in having high quality products. And it's little things, like if you were going to a meeting with a developer, you take this with you, talk to them for a few minutes, you leave it sitting on the table, and you say, I'll be back when I got one of the restroom. You walk back. When you come back, if that guy hadn't picked it up and flipped through it and read it, he's probably not interested in it, which probably means that that's a clue that he's not a good fit for your community. So little things like that are ways that you can use the document. And then if he's in here, you know the information that's in here, y'all can start to have good conversations about the kind of stuff and get to the quality of housing that you're interested in having here.
I'm very interested in all the overlays to help them and to help whoever future sits in these chairs as we grow, and because we're growing out and there's a lot of great opportunity, just to make sure that the tools are already here in the overlays, whether it's not just housing, businesses for certain storefronts, and let's get some common looks, like Cherokee's one of the main accesses in, and it's a hodgepodge of stuff. It is what it is, but as we move forward, we can help them with their overlays. And like I say, city councils, that's very important. What storage units? We gotta have them apparently, but to make them and/or.
Where and how, yeah.
I got 2 minutes.
But to your point though, and I'll almost set that overlay point real quick, is that that's the beauty of what a comprehensive plan does, is what we found from the public telling us, and everyone, that overlays are needed. And so now with the adoption of this plan, it gives staff permission to go and write and define and counsel a way to implement those overlays. Because the public has spoken and said, yes, we need it, because we want to respect the character of the Avondale Middle neighborhood. And so that was one of the bullets that gets adopted. So that's the power of the comprehensive plan, is it pulls everyone's thoughts onto the same page and allows us all to take a step forward.
So, I'm assuming over the span of time of adoption, like, to approval of the document or whatever, y'all stay involved, with us. So
Yes.
if we have further questions.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you want to go through the timeline from now until the end, and also tell them, send for comments.
So to help with the comment collection, because once again, this is all of our first time looking at that. What we'd like you to do is spend a few days reading, looking at this through, big questions, big comments. If you can send all those to Amanda, and that way her and her staff can then kind of distill those and get those back to us. Our goal will be over the next couple of weeks to get all those comments back, to make the edits in the document, and then to announce the document up for public hearing on December 3rd. So that means we have to put a final document out in the public, both online, at City Hall, at the public libraries, so anyone can go and access the document and look at it. And that way it's available for everyone to read, so then Planning Commission can take it up and adopt it one evening. Under our state code, it's Planning Commission's responsibility to adopt the document. Because it is Planning Commission's book to use. It's the goals, the visions, the ideas of the public that the Planning Commission can then make statements when development comes forward, then yes or no. That staff can say to the Planning Commission, this project or this developer is in line with our comprehensive plan. Staff would be in favor of this project. Now, once the Planning Commission has made their vote, up or down, yes or no, the developer of the project always will then have to go back to, most likely, council for a final decision. And the council is once again a public hearing where you and your constituents will weigh in on your opinions of what's been said before. So there are checks and balances through the process. But once again, the comp plan lays out those fundamental values that we're all starting with to make decisions on. But it's not a book that says, yes, this is the only way things can happen. So it gives the flexibility both to the Planning Commission and the council to make those decisions.
And hopefully it's inspiring to the citizens and to y'all. You look there and you see these projects and you think, wow, we can do this.
Yeah.
We want to do this. I'm looking at the mayor, I know there's some projects in there he's said, you need to do. I mean, there's some great infrastructure you need to do. There's other things you may want to do, but it's inspirational to the citizen. They see that and they say, wow, we're not just, oftentimes your biggest critic, we're fresh eyes. We don't live here, we drive in and we say, wow. Sometimes, as you know, your largest critic just doesn't think anything is happening. There's nothing happening here and there's nobody wants to come here. They're like, dude, we are doing a lot of cool things here. And then you start rattling them off, they say, oh yeah, we are doing that. They don't.
They still want more and more and more.
What have you done for me lately? Isn't that what the Ford commercial was?
Well, that is our work session. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank y'all so much, we appreciate y'all. Time we're gonna have some other business, no executive session, I need a motion to adjourn this work session. All in favor? Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all so much.
Happy to see y'all.
We'll give them a few minutes for anybody who wants to leave. You are welcome to stay in our council meeting. You don't have to get up on your seat, you can sit right there if you want to. Welcome you.
I